Hi everyone, my name is Ryan Cant. I'm the CEO at AirWrx, and today we're going to do a product unboxing and product review of the Dji M300 Rtk. We're going to go over its key benefits, some of its key features. We're going to go over all of its accessories and its payloads. We're going to even talk about maybe why you want to upgrade to an M300, or maybe you might want to go down to something like a Mavic Enterprise Advanced. So here we go. We're going to grab the box and we're going to go through all of the product's main features at first. So here's the M300 and its brand new hard case. Right off the get-go, you can see it's been designed in now a much smaller hard case than its predecessor, the M200. The M200, of course, it had a kind of a ribbing texture to it. It wasn't as sturdy as this, but Dji did a really good job of making and protecting the aircraft that's inside this case. Even the wheel supports are extremely sturdy, and it even has a pressurized valve here as well. So it's gonna ensure that there's no moisture dust getting into the aircraft. So as we open it up, you can see it's got plenty of space for additional accessories, batteries, or whatever you might want to put in it. So as you can see here on the top, we have the landing gear. We have a kind of a mesh baggie, which stores all of your propellers or spare propellers. And of course, you have the main aircraft here. It's flipped, so it's topside down in this way, and how they put it in this particular hard case. You have your remote controller. You have a couple of spare components here as well, like cables, some maybe spare parts, and you also have your harness for your control that goes around your neck. You have two battery bays at the front here, and then you have, of course, your instructional manual, which is a nice light Sunday read. So this is kind of the way the aircraft's been assembled, and again, I think they did a really good job of making sure there's plenty of space. It's in a smaller case than the M200, so moving it around is actually going to be a little bit easier. I've noticed that it's kind of a lighter case over the M200, but of course, you do only have the two batteries, and you don't have the opportunity for expansion, but the benefit with the M300 is they now have the battery charging case, so you do have the ability to then have 8 batteries on the go with that. So we're gonna take this bad boy out, we're gonna bring it on the table, and we're gonna talk about its main features next. So here we go. Okay, so here it is. This is the Dji M300 Rtk. This thing can literally do everything. It can even make you a cup of tea if you asked it to. But let's get into some of the key features and what kind of makes this and differentiates it from other Dji drones in their fleet. So here we have about 450 millimeter diagonal wheelbase when it's all folded, but the spread wing at diagonal wheelbase is 900 millimeters. It has an ascent speed of about 6 meters per second. Its descent speed is 5 meters per second, and its max speed is 20 meters per second. So it's still a pretty fast aircraft for an enterprise level drone. Its wind resistance is a level 7. It has an IP rating of IP45, so it can definitely deal with a light dust or rain. So obviously it's gonna open the doors to applications in some pretty difficult weather conditions. The temperature, it can go negative 20 degrees Celsius and also to a positive 50 degrees Celsius. So it can work in extremely cold environments, but also it can work in some pretty hot environments as well and deal with inactive cooling that's built within the airframe itself. As you can see, we have 6 directional obstacle avoidance sensors. So you're basically getting 360 degrees of obstacle avoidance, which is great for commercial operators that are operating in confined areas. So whether you're doing a cell tower application or a building inspection, you're never really gonna need to worry about this thing potentially flying into that asset. It really knows where everything is around it while you're flying. You do have an FPV camera that's built right into the front here. So you do have that. It's a wide angle lens too. So the operator is able to see everything around the front of the aircraft. So let's start unfolding this aircraft. We'll talk about where some of these different features and what's built into the aircraft itself and how to assemble it. So let's go ahead. So again, it comes with these prop holders. Great about the prop holders. I highly recommend keeping them on and using them at all times because they do protect your props, especially when you're unloading and loading the vehicle. So just pop those off really quick. Okay, so now that we got the prop holders off, obviously if you're gonna assemble it, I highly recommend putting the landing gear on while you got the top down, so that way it's easier to get the landing gear on. You can pop it over and then spread the wings. You'll see the wings and getting these arms out is a little bit tricky. It's well designed and nice compact, but you really gotta play with it a little bit. So just flip your aircraft then on its back like this. And all the Dji stuff, what's really nice about it is it has these twist locks. So again, you could pull it down a little bit and just line it up where you have the one plastic towards the outside. When you pop that in, just make sure you push it down and it's nice and snug. Of course, it won't twist if you don't get it all the way down. So once you get it down, make sure you give it a good lock. You want to get the red to red so that way you know it's in position, and you do the exact same thing on the far side. Okay, there we go. So now you just flip the aircraft over. Make sure your arms are out of the way of the props when you're doing so. So we're gonna go back this way here. Give you guys the front of the aircraft to look at. Okay, so now that we got the aircraft over, we just gotta pop the wings out. So basically you gotta play with it a little bit. So you wanna get the antenna arms out first. So it's the front arms that push forward. So once you get those out, then the RTK module arm actually then comes second. That's the easiest way to do it. So again, pop that all the way out, and then the RTK module arm comes out second. Again, twist locks, I really like these personally. It feels very secure, and you know when the arms are fully locked into place because they have these red markers again. So really make sure you give them a good twist, because obviously if they're not, your arm's gonna potentially give way during flight, which obviously could be a horrific incident. So again, we'll get these locked as well. And I'm lurking in a bit of a confined space here, so of course I recommend, if you're doing it out in the field, you're gonna have a little bit more space to work in. So there you have it. So let's talk about some of the features on the aircraft itself. So to the front, on the front arms, you have the RC transmitters. So that's gonna send all your UAV health and flight data to your RC controller. On these arms here, we have the RTK antennas. So that's gonna, if you have a DRTK base, you're gonna be able to increase your precision and your accuracy of the drone, positional accuracy of your drone. We have, again, on the top of this aircraft, you have 6 directional avoidance and detection sensors. So as you can see, we have front, we also have them on the sides, we have near infrared here, and then we have optical. We have them on the bottom. So I gotta take a look, but we have NIR there as well. We have a light beacon on the bottom too, which is great. A light beacon on the top. We have the NIR sensors and optical sensors as well on the back of this aircraft here, so NIR optical, and again on the side. So we do have, full spatial awareness of this aircraft. If you think for a particular application you needed more avoidance and detection, there is a CMS radar, which gets mounted directly to the top. So if you're doing something like a hydro line survey, these sensors won't actually pick up those thin lines. However, the CSM radar, it will pick those up. So there are an option for an accessory, which will give you absolute air detection or object avoidance detection for the M300, which is fantastic that they came out with that. So here we have the battery bay. So the batteries are a little different now in the M300 than they were in the M200. They're TB60 batteries. They're a bigger battery. A lot of people are a little bit frustrated that the TB55 batteries are no longer working with the M300. Main reason for that is because this aircraft is actually requiring a higher voltage, and a lot of respect to DJI in the fact that they refined their aircraft to get additional flight time with now these higher end sensors in the enterprise field that are coming out, like the L1 and the P1, which we'll talk about later. But I think they did a really good job in ensuring that this aircraft is gonna fly efficiently, and it's gonna be able to do the job that enterprise level applications are gonna require from it. So it is an enterprise UAV. But of course, same kind of nature in how the batteries go in. They just slide, as the M200, they just slide in, and they have a little bit of battery lock here on the back, which is kind of nice. So it ensures that, in any scenario, if it wasn't fully clipped in for whatever reason, it's not gonna slide out. So great on them for doing that. What's new is they have now ports on the top of the aircraft, which are your power and signal ports for any additional accessories. So like we talked about before, CSM radar, or any optical payload that's going on the top, you then have ports here that it then plugs into, and your aircraft will then be able to speak to that top mounted. So you do have 2 top mounting or mounting kits, but of course the first one here that comes with the M300 is the single mounting. So of course it's just a single sky port towards the bottom with rubber dampeners. That really helps reduce the amount of vibration on the payload. There are a list of different payloads which we'll get into, but in terms of the mount, there is a dual payload mount as well. So the dual payload mount allows you to then attach 2 payloads to the front end of the aircraft. And then they also have, again, the top mount. The top mount can be used for cameras, the CSM radar, and it gets top mounted. So if you were ever doing an inspection like a bridge where you needed the camera to look upwards, you have a camera which can then of course be top mounted, but there are other accessories that are out, like the CSM radar, and probably more to come, which will benefit from a top mount payload option. The reason why we do have this, and I don't want to miss this fact, is we do have the obstacle avoidance on the top, is because we want to be able to get everything in and around the aircraft and the props out of the way, so we have full unobstructed vision of objects, and it doesn't have anything in its way. And that's why, unusual to DJI design, the props are actually bottom mounted. So the motors are mounted bottom side on the aircraft arms, which is the first time that we've seen DJI do this of any drone that they've produced on the market. So here we have, one thing I also want to mention is we do have this kind of interesting design here on the bottom of the aircraft. We do believe that DJI is potentially coming out with some type of sensor that will then be able to utilize this interesting grid pattern they have here, but only time will tell what that is actually going to be used for. But we do suspect something may be utilizing that space in the time to come, because it's obviously a unique little kind of pattern that they've used there, which kind of tells us a story to come. So in terms of the mounts, we have them here. So the top mount, it's just basically a little top mount that gets mounted onto these bracket spaces that are already here outlined on the aircraft. So it just screws in, and of course, then the payload gets attached to the top. And then we do have the dual mount. So the dual mount here looks like this, and it's basically just double of this. So just two. So you can get these. This does not come with the base model M300. You do have to buy this separately, but obviously when you need to upgrade to have two payloads, do so. The M300, in terms of payload capacity and flight time, the flight time of the M300 is 55 minutes, which in the industry, that is kudos to DJI. That is awesome. Most drones on the market, you're gonna get 30, 35 minutes of flight time, but the fact that they were able to achieve 55 minutes of flight time with no payload is honestly, that's a big achievement on its own. Of course, with different payloads, you have different power consumption. So if you're gonna have an H20T or an L1, those different payloads are gonna be using different amount of power. So you're gonna reduce your flight time depending on which payload you use, which then when, of course, you're using like an L1, you're gonna be looking more closer to like 30, 35 minutes of flight time, depending, of course, on the wind conditions. But of course, altogether, DJI did a really good job on redesigning the new M300, which has kind of come through history of their design of the M1, the M200, the M200 V2 series, and now the M300, which in itself is a really elite aircraft. Before we segue into the payloads, I quickly want to talk about the M300 RC controller. Now, the RC controller, for one, has been completely redesigned. And a lot of good things to talk about this controller in particular compared to the M200. Now the M200 controller, it was big, it was heavy. You needed a full chest strap to hold it, to feel comfortable if you were flying for multiple hours. The M200 controller also had the crystal sky mount on it, which added even more weight. Great that it had a highlight display. But again, this also kind of crams all that into a small form factor. It has the same texture as the Mavic Air 2 controllers, which is, personally I like it. It kind of feels really nice in the hand. It has enough grip to really get a good hold on it. These slots at the end there kind of fits nice in the palm. So when your hands come over the controller, your thumbs really fit nicely on the joysticks. So you have full control. Same kind of texture too on the top of the joysticks, this metal grip pattern. You get a lot of grip on your thumbs when you're flying the aircraft. And of course you have your gimbal switches here, which again are also really comfortable, and you have your trigger and your record on the left. You have a couple different ports on the back here. So you have HDMI out, and you also have USB out as well. So if you wanted to connect it to an external monitor, so for example, if you wanted to actually use a Crystal Sky monitor, you can mount it here, but now that it has an integrated screen interface right here, you really don't need to. And that's what kind of this whole design is kind of mimicking the smart controllers. It's to give the operator an all-in-one, and that's what it should be. So they did a really good job on this. And because it's lighter, you just need a neck strap. So instead of the M200, which you had a full chest harness, this now is just a simple over the neck, less likely to drop, but a lot more comfortable when you're actually walking around and maybe having to do something else. Of course, the operator needs to focus on its operation, but prior to, you know, it's just something that's a little bit lighter, and you have the security and the confidence to know that your controller is not gonna fumble around. So they did a really good job on this, really happy. You do have the original Crystal Sky batteries that then go into the back. So it has an internal battery in it. So you actually are able to hot swap these batteries in, but these give you an additional 4 hours of flight. So the amount of battery juice that this is, I mean, you're gonna be able to fly for a really long time with this setup. And it was really smart that they do have these kind of battery expansion packs to be able to fly and use the RC controller for extended periods, because now the M300 does have 55 minutes of flight time without a payload. So it does give you a lot of flexibility. DJI introduced 4 new payloads for the M300. They introduced the H20 series, which comes in an H20, an H20T, an L1, and a P1. They do also have compatibility with only a few M200 sensors, which include the X-T2 and the Z30. So unfortunately, your X5S and your X7 are no longer compatible, which were obviously an elite camera for those in the photography space. Who knows what DJI's got in their bags to come, but these are enterprise grade payloads, and they're really answering certain industrial applications for those that are in particular spaces that now the M200 may have not been able to do quite what these typical payloads and sensors are able to do. So in front of us here, we have the H20T. The H20T, the T stands for thermal. So you can get the H20, which has all the optical sensors, but it does not have the thermal sensor. Of course, there's a difference in price because you do have a thermal sensor. So this is the H20T here, okay? So what we have on the front, let's take this case off. We have a 20 megapixel camera. It's a 1-inch CMOS sensor. So that's gonna be your high resolution optical sensor. You get 32 time digital zoom. We also have a 12 megapixel wide angle camera. The reason why that is because with the M300, you can have 2 operators. You can have a drone operator and a payload operator. So the drone operator is gonna be able to use the FPV camera on the drone for navigation, but the payload operator is gonna be able to use this for a wider field of view. Because if they're zooming up closely to a particular asset, then they're gonna be able to use this to better spatial awareness. Then here we have a rangefinder. The rangefinder is good to 1,200 meters. So it's a laser rangefinder. It can actually tell you how far a particular object is away from the aircraft. And then here you have the thermal sensor. So this thermal sensor is a 640 by 512 pixel thermal sensor, radiometric thermal sensor. I mean, it's top of the line, and in terms of the resolution you're getting from that, especially at altitude, it's ideal to have a higher resolution thermal sensor, which I think makes a lot of sense for those in this enterprise space to just choose a 640 over a 320. But of course, I think that the key features of this is how it operates with the M300. So this particular camera here, it has a couple features with the M300 that kind of distinguish itself from the other payloads. So you have smart pin and track. Smart pin and track, what it allows you to do is on your ground control interface, you're able to isolate an object. So let's say the aircraft is flying above a waterway, a river, and there's a particular fishing vessel that's out, you know, maybe 800 meters away. You can point on that vessel, and it will then, of course, because of the rangefinder, tell you how far away that boat is from the aircraft. So it'll say it's exactly 812 meters away. Then what you can do is you can actually click and select a box area around that fishing vessel, and you can start track mode. So the aircraft will actually ensure that it follows that particular fishing vessel at the distance, the registered distance of 812 meters. So it's a really cool feature and is ideal for people that are in the public safety sector, whether you're a police officer or a firefighter. This is gonna be your go-to sensor right here. This has got everything you can actually wish for in a sensor where thermal is gonna be integrated to an optical sensor. So it's a really interesting feature. Now you could go to an H20, which is more catered to inspection industries. So something like a hydro line or a cell tower. It has the Smart Check AI. So what you actually can do with Smart Check AI is start to automate your inspection process, which is actually really fascinating. So if you're ever doing say a cell tower, you can tell it to look for a specific RRU rack. And every time you're looking at the cables on that RRU rack, whether your gimbal's pointed, you know, 10, 20 degrees upwards, looking at the cabling underneath the ROV rack or the antennas. When you frame that up, you can tell it to remember that exact layout. So the distance the drone is away from that asset, the distance, the angle that the camera is pointed, and then the way it's framed up. So the zoom level of that 20 megapixel camera and how close it is to that particular asset. And it'll try to frame that up every single time it flies around an asset. So you start to automate processes. Of course, there's a little bit of lag room into ensuring that it's accurate, and there's a little bit of work on the operators to then refine their industrial application for that purpose. However, it's there, it's available. This drone is now smart enough to start doing work on its own, which is opening a whole nother category of how we're using drones. I mean, we're all excited about BVLOS and allowing drones to automate workflows at a larger scale. However, this is more about how smart can we make the drone. And that's gonna allow people who are in the vertical asset inspection industry, start to really utilize the drone as its own robotic tool and thinking for itself, which is kind of incredible, thinking knowing that you're gonna be able to then put the drone up in the air and it's gonna be able to do an entire, hydro line survey or cell tower survey on its own. I mean, to me, that's mind-boggling. A lot of us hadn't even thought of that, but the fact that DJI has now worked that out and is allowing people to start building those tools into their aircraft, into their workflow, is kind of groundbreaking in itself. So that's the H20T. Of course, the DJI does have two other sensors. It has the L1 and the P1. Now the Zenmuse L1 is a LiDAR sensor. It uses the Livox LiDAR. It shoots 450,000 points per second. That particular LiDAR sensor in itself is gonna be great for surveyors who are trying to get pinpoint accuracy along a vertical structure. I mean, the point cloud density and what DJI has done and built it into their controller, being able to have a live feed of the point cloud as it's being built while the drone is flying is remarkable. But also what you're able to do that point cloud data afterwards into DJI Terra. They've created a seamless workflow that allows the operator to then collect LiDAR data, which is colorized point cloud, and then put that into DJI Terra and have an entire surveyed area that's acres on acres that's been surveyed using the DJI M300 because of the extended flight time. Now, if the L1 is not quite what you're looking for, you do have the P1. The P1 is a full frame format sensor. It's 45 megapixels. You're gonna get incredible ground sampling distance, even flying at a high altitude of 90 meters. So if you're looking at something that's better than maybe what you have with the M200, which may be using an X5S or an X7, then I would say the P1 is gonna be your next best sensor that's gonna give you even better, crisper images to build out a better 3D model, a photogrammish 3D model, beyond maybe what those are capable, of course, because of the amount of pixels in the sensor. So those are the two sensors that then the four sensors that DJI has come out with are all new to the M300 and are only compatible with the M300. But of course, you do have backwards compatibility with the Z30 and the XT2. And you obviously have third-party options as well. Okay, so here we have the DJI BS60 intelligent battery station. So again, it's in a nice hard case similar to the M300. When you open it up, you'll see that you have 8 different slots for the TV60 batteries, which is really nice. So you can put all 8 in there. It only works at 2 at a time, but again, at least it'll continue working through the next sets of batteries as it goes. What's kind of nice is when you plug it in through the wall mount, you have this little plastic piece here that keeps it from closing. So that's gonna actually stop the battery lid from closing, which obviously could be an issue if it was to close, because we have these vents here to keep all of the battery system cool. So this is inactive cooling and it has to be open at all times. So of course, make sure you have that in fully locked position. So as we can see here, we have this little indicators for the batteries. So what this is doing, if the battery was in, it would be able to tell you which tray it's on. So if it's on, say, this bottom tray, this little indicator will light up green, and then it'll tell you at what percent charge it's at. So 25, 50, 75, or 100, almost to 100% charge. And once it's done that, then of course you'll see the next battery indicator light up and it'll start working through that. So it's really nifty in that you don't have to hang around and wait for, as you did with the M200, which was kind of this, it was a kind of a neat battery charging solution, but it was this almost like a Star Wars style tripod thing where you clip in and it would charge 2 batteries on opposite sides, and once those charged, it would work on the next 2 sets. It was kind of a nifty little like pod that they built. However, I think we all were working and wishing that we had one of these because, of course, instead of only having 4, we now have 8, and we have a dedicated charging solution. One thing I will say is I would not recommend transporting your batteries in this, just because there's a little bit of wiggle, and these connectors for the batteries that are on the bottoms, they are sensitive. They're solid connectors, right? So if there's any wiggle, you could damage them. So and when you charge, when you are moving and you do put this down, and you did have batteries in here, you'll notice that there's a bit of a space between the top of the case and the battery. So if you were, and you wanted to use this battery charger, I would highly recommend, if that was the case, put a small piece of foam on the bottom in each cell. It didn't come with that, but then that way it'll reduce the amount of headspace and distance between the top of battery and top of case, and it'll protect the pins on the bottom as well. But really, really nifty case. I'm really happy that they came with this. This really does separate the M300 as its enterprise level and allows you to really keep your batteries charged on the go. So when you come back at the end of your workday, pop, 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 you head home and you're good to go. So kudos to DJI finally coming with the battery case, and we're excited to see that they have it. So one thing I do want to make mention too is you do have your RC controller charging hubs here too. So your RC, those TB batteries, or the BS30 batteries, can be then placed into these slots, and you can go ahead and charge those as well. So everything can be charged for the M300 in this case, and that's all that matters. So this is a really fantastic solution. So definitely pick up one of these when you get your M300. All right, so now that we've reviewed the M300 Rtk, some of the payloads, its key features and accessories, let's kind of dive into maybe why you'd want to upgrade to an M300 if you already have maybe an M200 or another drone in your fleet like an M600 with other accessories that you may have then customized. Maybe why you wouldn't even want to go up to an M300. Maybe it doesn't make sense for the particular application that you're going to be using a drone for. So this is all based on personal preference, and also kind of some of the key reasons to certain industries and what they're going to be wanting, the certain sensors for certain drones, and where you might need to find kind of a middle ground based on your budget. So we believe that probably the M300 is going to be a great upgrade if you do not own a drone that has LiDAR yet. So you don't have a Yellow Scan or a Regal Lux or any of those other types of LiDARs. It's a great drone, entry-level drone, especially with the LiDAR that is, in terms of other LiDARs on the market, relatively affordable. So that would be a really big reason to why one would want to jump up to an M300. Another one may be that you want to pin and track an object. So police may want to have that feature to follow a suspect. That would be one key feature that would actually benefit them in the way they're using their drone, maybe to benefit them what they're not able to get out of the M200 at current. Another reason potentially would be also you want to use the P1. Now the P1 sensor is a full frame camera. So you're going to get a lot higher resolution than you would from an X7 or an X5S. Now, certain applications that will benefit from that is going to be construction, mapping, surveying. So you want to fly a larger area potentially. So you're going to put your drone up at a higher altitude, but you're going to still really get a really low ground sampling distance because the resolution is so high. Another reason would just be asset inspection, where a higher resolution drone is going to build out a higher detailed 3D rendering of that model. So that would be a benefit to be able to do something where if you're trying to build a really good and highly texturized or a really dense point cloud for an asset, where you can fly the drone then relatively close to it and still get a really good definition within that model. That would be another key benefit because it's the only camera. Otherwise, you're going to something third party where you'd be attaching say a phase 1 onto an M600. Which of course there's going to be quite a large difference in price between an M300 P1 and an M600, which is now end of life, where you then have to find a drone that would then adopt a phase 1. But phase 1 is now making their camera with a gimbal that is suitable with an M300. So if you want to potentially go that route and get even higher resolution, they do have 50 megapixel, 100 megapixel, 150 megapixel options. So you do have other options there too to even get higher resolution imagery, which again, depending on the application that you're going after, it may be beneficial to go that route. Now, when you start adding some of the drone and the payloads, it starts to get a little pricey for some. In our personal opinion, we think that the M300, with the payloads that are there, it's really difficult to find something in the market that even compares in a price. And when you package together, then when looking at other alternatives, becomes relatively affordable. And the biggest feature, in our personal opinion, is reliability and the fact that they have basic care on their products. So you don't have to go out and try and find limited liability or haul insurance through insurance providers when they're just gonna take care of it at a really reasonable fee. So that's the main reasons why you'd want to go to an M300. Now let's look at the reasons maybe why you wouldn't. And I think that the main reason would be you just don't need these higher level sensors. So obviously the next drone down from that would be not only higher level sensors, but cost. But the next drone down from that would be the Mavic Enterprise Advanced. So the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced is about $8,000 Canadian, so $7,999. And of course, that's cheaper than the M300 alone. So when you start to look at what it offers, it actually does offer a nice little tiny drone in a really compact package, but also really easy to fly, really easy to unbox and get in the air. So the drone itself, it does have a thermal sensor on it. It's packed with a FLIR boson, which is a miniaturized but yet very powerful thermal sensor. So let's not look at it that because it's a smaller thermal sensor, it's not as powerful. It has actually been designed really well. And again, it has then a 48 megapixel camera on it, which technically is a 12 megapixel camera. However, it does have the ability to take multiple captures to render the photo, to be able to put multiple images together to increase and heighten the resolution of the image. So of course, in flight, you'd have to keep the drone perfectly stable. Otherwise, your single shot points are 12 megapixels. Regardless, the capture is and the photo resolution of that drone is really good. So if you're going to be typically getting close to an asset, within 10-15 meters, I mean, that drone is going to be great. Yeah, you're having to fly a little close to the asset, but if you're a good pilot, it shouldn't be too big of an issue. If you're highly experienced, getting close to assets shouldn't be uncomfortable, especially when you are 10-15 meters away from the asset. That isn't usually an issue with the Mavic 2 because it's such a small drone. It's nimble and you're able to control it, with confidence when you get closer to assets. Of course, when you're flying an M300 closer to an asset, it becomes a little bit more of a concern because obviously the potential for an incident and a mishap could be far greater in the destruction that it could create. Of course, with an M300, it could be a bit of a different scenario when that were to potentially have a mishap. So that would be the next drone down. But of course, every drone has its application, whether you need an M300 or whether you need a Mavic 2 Advanced. You do have other alternatives, even in the smaller consumer categories, that sometimes can still get the job done. So really, it just depends on what your application is and what your client's output requirements are. Really understand your industry, and your client's gonna be able to kind of get an idea of what they really, really want. And then you're gonna have to look at it and meet that need versus maybe what the budget is. And that will help dictate what you're after. But we really love the M300 package. We think they've done a fantastic job. We understand that the M300 came at a time when the Matrice 200 had just kind of been only in the market for about a year and a half from the V2 series, and with such significant upgrades, new payloads, new batteries. It was a bit of a shock, but in all honesty, it was probably the best thing DJI could do to rival with their competition, to be able to push the forefront of the commercial and enterprise drone industry, to be able to push new frontiers in how we're using these drones with spot AI detection, pinpoint and track. These are revolutionary features. These are things that every other drone company is gonna have to come up and match if they're gonna try to compete. And DJI's, with their 55 minute of flight time with no payload, is really astonishing to me how they've been able to achieve that. And I've personally very proud of what they've accomplished. And I think that anyone that owns this drone or the Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced are gonna be incredibly happy with the drone because they're gonna be able to put it to work. It's gonna be reliable. And at the end of the day, they're gonna get a return on their investment regardless. So I hope you learned a lot from this session. I think there was a lot of information covered. We covered a lot of the technical specs and features, some of the payloads and the accessories. But again, most importantly, we want to ensure that you understand what this product is capable of and what you could use it for in its end use. And so we hope that this can integrate into your workflow. AirWrx is here to help you. So if you have any questions, we will answer all of that you have, in addition to what we have maybe not covered. We are able to support you with getting your pilots trained, getting them certified with a flight review. And of course, we want to make sure that you're trained on this equipment. So having informational videos on how to fly and feel more comfortable so you don't have that first fear of flight if it is your first time flying that particular aircraft like the M300, which of course, bigger than a Mavic 2. But again, feel free to reach out. We're here to help and make sure that you build the best drone program possible. Give us a call, send us an email. But until then, stay tuned. We have a couple more product features coming up, and we also have some really awesome video captures of us in the field and other things that we're working on at AirWrx. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.